survivor. How are you doing tonight, Angela?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And I want to make sure if all those watching, please let us know if you experience any technical difficulties at all, any audio issues or anything like that. Please do let me know. I know a minute ago you guys were like, I can't hear you. And that was when I was like a little overlay person on top of a video. And so sorry about that, but I think we got that all resolved. But be sure to speak up if you see or hear anything funky. Okay, back to you, Angela. We were just talking off camera that you were actually a part of the Sound of Survivors, which was a really cool little series that we did. It's mostly been on TikTok, but I believe it's also been on Instagram by now. It was held at Deborah Gloria's photography studio, and an intern, Taruna Kasai, it was her vision of the whole thing. And just tell us a little bit about that real quick, and then we'll get started on all about you and your journey.
It it was one of the most amazing experiences, despite the fact that it was the coolest breast cancer thing to do that I could do. But both of them just made me feel welcomed and comfortable and safe and valued. And it was the first time that I kind of talked about my cancer in a positive way, if that makes sense.
It totally does,
Um,
yeah.
and and maybe you can relate to this. I'm still in survivorship, so a lot of the theme of it was beauty, and we made a video. We were taking photographs, and I've been pretty uncomfortable with that, with photographs and things since cancer. And so to have photos taken of me, especially with the theme being cancer, where I felt beautiful finally for the first time in 4 years, was pretty amazing. And it just, the whole experience felt very cathartic. I didn't mean to like work out problems or heal a little bit during it, but that's what they gave me. That's what ended up happening as we did the photos and changed scenery and outfits and talked about theme and message and everything. It just kind of came full circle.
That's
And
so cool. That's really
yeah,
cool. I
it
mean, Deborah
really was.
Gloria is really, really great about that. She did, like, healing sessions, pretty frequently years ago, and I did one of those with her, and, it is totally therapeutic having a session like that where you get to talk about everything that you went through and where you are now and kind of experience the joy of being on the other side of it.
Yeah, yeah. Like I didn't expect joy at all.
Right.
Like I was really apprehensive going into it. And I, oh, like I said, cathartic. That's the only thing I can think to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm glad you were a part of that. And thank you for doing that. I definitely want to get right into your story because, as I was mentioning before you came on, every person that we have on the show is such an inspiration, and every story is so different. And
Mhm.
so, I want you to take us back, if you would, to before you were diagnosed and kind of what led up to that. Were you being screened regularly, or how did it
Yes,
all come to be?
I was 45, so I'd started screening at 40. And I had skipped the summer before because I didn't have family history or anything they had said with my young age I could do every 2 years. So that's what I had done. And in March of 2020, I was living my best life. Like absolutely. I was in a career at a location at a school that had my heart, that I loved, that was being successful. Um my dad had taken me on a 45th birthday trip to Oklahoma City, and that's where I think that's really where COVID, like it was on that trip that COVID became real for me in the US, like here. And I came back home from that trip, and the next day I learned school was going to be pushed forward a week. We were going to get an extra spring break. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then we learned there was going to be another spring break. I was like, oh, okay. And I thought, you know what? Let's knock out some doctor appointments. I do all, as a teacher, I try, like, I hate missing work. Love being at school, and I try to do all my appointments in June and July. So I kind of went down my list and started calling doctors, and a lot of them were like, no, you have to wait the full year. We can't see you till like June
Right.
14th.
Insurance. Right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
But a couple of them were like, ooh, due to COVID, we're about to close down, or we're relocating, or we're not going to see patients. So if you were like, yes, we're going to go ahead and make it work, get in here now. And I was like, in my head thinking, well, I'm going back to work in a week. We're returning, to normal in a week. But I was like, okay, so I got a few scheduled. That included the mammogram. Um, and I at that point, I actually loved getting mammograms. I loved my center. I always got like a cup of hot tea. They didn't hurt me at the time with the boobs I had then. Like, I didn't know why anyone complained. I was like, oh. And it was just like another day for me.
I mean,
And when
so it's so ironic because I'm sitting here listening to you and I see where we're headed is that if it weren't for COVID, right, you wouldn't have gone and tried to schedule this appointment that ended up being so dang important. And I want everybody to hear you when you say it was no big deal doing the mammogram and everything because believe me, finding out you have breast cancer at a later stage is way worse than what you go through to get a mammogram.
Mhm.
So do those mammograms. Okay, continue where you were. Go for it.
So yeah, I got my mammogram, and while I was there, I was like talking to people, and we're in mass. Oh, and I remember thinking, oh, this is cool. I got a free mask because you couldn't find masks at that time. And I was like, oh, can I get some toilet paper while I'm here too? Maybe. Like,
That's
it
awesome.
was a great appointment, I thought.
Right, you're like
Um,
toilet paper, some Lysol, some,
yeah, I
you
got
know,
yeah, like yay. And I did. I was loving the shutdown. Like, I was in my element and stuck in my house, like having no problems with this at the moment. Like, yeah, make me stay home. And so they called me back, and I want to say it was like a day or two, and they were like, hey, we need to do an ultrasound. And that was sometimes normal. My breasts were um humongous at the time. And so often that would happen, and went back in, did an ultrasound, and then they were like, oh, we need to do another one. And then it was a couple of days later, oh, now we need to do something else. And I was like, oh my gosh. And there was the only reason I was leaving the house at that time. And again, I can't shush my cat. I'm sorry. Um, and I thought, yeah, sorry,
oh god.
Misty,
Yeah, be
shh,
cool. Be cool.
be cool, cat. And again, thought nothing of it. I went in, I remember going in for the third thing. It was like mammogram, something else, and then the third one. And I was talking to the tech about her job. And everyone was so lighthearted, and like they were like, oh, there's no way you have, don't be worried. And I wasn't worried. And I was like, ooh, can you tell if someone, like, if you see something? And she was like, yeah, I can. And I was like, ooh, what do you do? And she was like, oh, I can't say anything. I was like, okay. And so she was showing me the screen, and I was like, ooh, teach me your job. And so she was like showing me all this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Cause my grandfather was a radiologist. So I was like fascinated.
I think
And
it's so cool to like gain knowledge from all that stuff too. I mean, I'm the same way. Like somebody on our board always says this knowledge is power, and it truly is. It's so great to learn that kind of stuff.
I mean, absolutely. As a teacher, all I thought was, this is a career I can learn about real quick to pass on to my students next week when I go back to work.
How cool is that?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so she's showing me everything. And then all of a sudden she like got quiet, and she turned the screen back towards her and started pushing a button a lot. And I was like, what's going on? She was like, oh, no, I'm just taking photos. Like, but I knew right then. I was like, something's weird. Like, everything changed. And so she went away, came back, brought a doctor with her, and they were like, we need to have you in tomorrow for a biopsy. And I was like, okay.
Tomorrow seems pretty quick. I mean, that must have
Yeah.
been kind of scary to hear, was it?
Yeah. And a lot of it was the center was being shut down
Right.
because of COVID.
Okay. Got you. Got you.
Something, Greg Abbott was shutting down the center. I don't know. So it
Got
was
you.
something like that. And I don't remember all the details. But so they were like, we need to get you in here now. I was like, okay. Came back. They did a biopsy. It hurts. And but I was awake for it and everything. And when I left the biopsy that day, I went to shop for toilet paper. And then I went,
Priorities.
yeah, and then I went and test drove a used BMW because I was going to buy a car.
Wow. You're right. You're getting all these things done during the shutdown or at the top of the shutdown. You're like, this is what's
I was
happening. You're like,
Yeah,
whatever.
I would. And again, I thought, oh, I've got savings.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to go buy my dream car. Like, and that a white BMW convertible was my dream car. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go buy my dream car right now. And I found it. And the only reason I did not buy it that night after the biopsy was that the banks were closed and we couldn't do financing. So I had an appointment to come back to buy the car the next day.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yes. And weirdly, they sold the car out from under me. And I got the phone call like in the afternoon. And I remember like crying, like thinking, oh, it's the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, little did you know.
Yeah. And then on April, and again, forgot about everything else. And then on April 8th, my gynecologist called me, and I hadn't been to my gynecologist because that was a yearly thing that I wasn't allowed to go to. So I thought that was weird. Why is my gyno calling me? And I answered the phone, and I don't remember much of what she said other than you have breast cancer. And I know there were other words and other things, and we hung up. And I sent a text to my mom and dad, and I said, I have breast cancer. And then I turned my phone off and I went on a walk and then came back in and I watched, I believe it was 4 Asian rom-com movies in a row on Netflix for the next like 8 hours. Had my phone off and I just lay it on
Disconnected.
my couch.
Yeah.
And I watched one movie. I mean, same type of movie, everything to
Were you,
all the boys I've loved before. Like,
were you living by yourself at that time?
oh, yes, I live by myself.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the cat.
Yeah,
The
with
cat.
the cat,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh,
So what was going through your mind? I know like what you said, like I think a lot of us experience that when we get that phone call where it's just like you don't hear anything else. It's just everything goes white, it's just like you don't hear anything. And so you hang up the phone. I'm sure that your parents were panicked when you texted them and then they probably couldn't reach you for a
yeah,
while
I got
because
in
you shut
trouble for
down.
that.
Yeah, I bet
Mhm.
so. I would have gotten in trouble too.
Yeah.
So, what were you? Tell me your thoughts at the time. I mean, were you thinking this is it? Is it's over? Or I mean, like, tell me what your thoughts were.
I had no thoughts. I'm going to be really honest. I went on a walk um and watched all those movies and my thought was tomorrow I'll wake up and that would have like that didn't happen. I very much went into denial. And I stayed there for quite a while, like many, many months. I
Wow,
was in
months.
denial.
Wow.
Months. Yeah, no, I mean, I was bald in the middle of chemo before I think I like woke up and
So
was like,
you weren't in
crap.
such denial that you didn't do anything. You jumped into whatever it was that was needed, but you just weren't accepting what was happening to you. Is that
I
right?
guess I felt like I had no control. Like it
Yeah.
didn't matter. And I kept waiting for them to like, oops, mistake. The biggest thing was like my mom and dad were like, well, what cancer do you have? I was like, breast cancer. And they were like, no, what kind? I was like, breast cancer. Like I didn't know there were kinds.
Right, right. I mean, none of it
Oh,
seems like none of us did. Like, I mean, I didn't either. Like, all the different, we all know about stages or you hear about stages, but you don't know
yes.
about grades or like different hormones, whether it's HER2 positive or ER positive, triple negative, all these other things. And there's so many more things now and like levels of stages. Yeah, girl, I
So
know.
so no, I had to call the gyno back
Yeah.
and was like, my mommy and daddy said, I need to ask you what kind of breast cancer I have. And
That's
I
so
have to
funny.
write it down.
Uh-huh.
So then I memorized invasive ductal carcinoma, triple negative, stage 1, grade 3.
And I think you and I have talked about this before that we were diagnosed with the same thing. High
Yes.
grade grade 3 triple negative stage 1. So they were able to stage you just from the biopsy, is that right? Or was it after the surgery where they staged
No, it
you?
was that. No, because I didn't have surgery. This was April. I didn't have surgery till October.
Got you.
So
Okay.
all this was done with the biopsy. I had 2 tumors. It had already multiplied.
Wow. Yeah. Got you. Okay.
Mm.
Wow, girl. Okay, so you get the diagnosis, you go into kind of a you kind of withdraw, you are in denial, but you do start treatment. So talk about what was the first treatment you started going through.
Um, Also at this time, it's important to note that I am in Zoom school. As a teacher, we are starting, like it has now been told, we're not getting to go back to school. And at that moment, as hard as this might be to believe, that is what that's what I was grieving that. Like I didn't have space in my head or my heart to acknowledge cancer because I had to accept that I wasn't going back to school and not seeing my students that school year.
Right.
And that to a teacher, to especially a single teacher who's done this 27 years, that was my lifeline. That was everything. And so it was very easy for me to push cancer to the side and put all my energy into making sure my students were okay in the pandemic, where they were in their household, you know, were they staying safe? All my energy went there, not on myself, which is also part of why I didn't acknowledge I had it until July, basically.
Wow.
But
Yeah, I mean that's anybody I've spoken with that was diagnosed with breast cancer during COVID. It just sounds like the worst, because you're
oh yeah.
so isolated. You can't bring anybody with you to treatment.
Mhm.
You're completely masked up. They're probably wearing like the face shields and the masks and the gloves, and it's like hazmat workers are giving you your chemo or something. It's just
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, yeah, and I
It's
just can't
scary.
imagine. Yeah, can't imagine how hard that would be. I mean, even when I went through it in 2010, I was terrified of getting sick, and I wore a mask back then, and that was before anybody wore masks. And so to
Yeah.
go through it at that time, I'm sure that had to be completely terrifying.
Well, and the doctors, because I had so many of them, kept saying, we can cure your cancer. You got here so early, because it was like smaller than end of a pencil, they kept saying. And they were like, we just got to keep it from doubling anymore. But we're going to cure your cancer. But if you get COVID, we're not sure we can keep you alive. And
Yeah,
that was like every doctor visit, every chemo, everything
yeah,
was, you cannot get COVID.
yep, yep.
And so I was literally like in isolation. My father took care of me. He was like my main caregiver. And there were times he like didn't want my mom to come over. He wouldn't let anyone, if they came to the house, they couldn't come to my bedroom. Like I was very isolated during that time, and very sick, obviously. But yes, the first thing that Dr. Ojo wanted to do was the lumpectomy. Um, and we weren't for sure if I was going to go mastectomy or lumpectomy, but surgery was the first thing she wanted to do. And at the time, the the government wouldn't let her. Like, because of COVID, if I did the surgery, I would only have like one breast. Like, there was something with like reconstruction. Basically, it was because of COVID, I couldn't have my surgery first. So we had to go straight into, oh, the cat's here. We had to go straight into surgery. And I mean, I'm sorry, straight into chemo. So I had my port surgery and started chemo all while I was hiding that I've been diagnosed with cancer from my students,
Oh
because I
wow.
was teaching on Zoom. And sometimes I was teaching on Zoom in the chemo room.
Are you serious?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and and like you were hiding the fact that you
I
were getting
just,
chemo.
yeah, I just turned my
Whoa.
you off that day. There were times I was sick on the toilet. Sorry if my students are hearing this. That I was like violently ill with my
Really?
laptop in the bathroom, just like
Can you
off, like if I needed a vomit or whatever, I was, bleeding
can,
from the
oh my
nose,
gosh.
like
Yeah.
false, like while I had class
Yeah,
going.
yeah. Um
They
I,
never knew.
yeah. I want to be sure that we get to all the points of
Yes.
your treatment. I know that we're getting short on time. We've got about
Oh,
probably about 5 or 10 minutes left. I know. Can you believe it? But I just wanted to talk a little bit about. So you started your chemo. Can you tell us what type of chemo you were on? Do you recall the names?
oh, the Red Devil.
Uh huh. Yeah, adriamycin and Cytoxin, probably.
Yeah, and then Taxol.
Taxol. Okay, and that's
Mhm.
everything that you were on.
Yeah, I had 2 rounds. I did Red Devil for 2 months, and then Taxol and something else. There were two of them
Okay.
for the last like 3 to 4 months.
Keytruda, maybe.
Oh, not Katrina.
Okay.
No, not that one.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. I will not remember
No,
that.
no, it's okay. I'm always curious because I know some things have changed over the years with treatment for triple negative breast cancer, but it does always seem like adriamycin, Cytoxin, which is like adriamycin is the red devil, and
Mhm.
Cytoxins they call it AC. They give that together, and then Taxol after those are that's pretty common. So I always like to ask that. So you did all your rounds of chemo first. You had your Portisol, you had your
Mhm.
rounds of chemo, and then you had a lumpectomy. Is that right?
Yes. Then in October, I had the lumpectomy. And we ended up because we learned that chemo killed both of my tumors by August. Um, we were able to go with the lumpectomy route. So I was very excited. And we saved my nipples, if I'm allowed to say that. So I was very excited for having the option of a lumpectomy. And the surgery was
Yeah,
like the only maybe positive thing in the whole thing.
got
As
you.
someone that wanted a breast reduction their whole life,
Oh,
it took
okay.
cancer for me to get one.
So you had a breast reduction at the same time as your
Yes.
lumpectomy, is that right? Okay, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
And a lift.
Yeah, that's cool. That's I mean, like you said, it's kind of a positive out of a negative. You kind of got to do something that you had wanted to do. Um,
Yeah.
did you tell me? Did you ever have genetic testing in this
Yes. Oh, I
process?
did all the
Uh
things.
huh.
I was negative, nothing.
No, no findings anywhere. Got you. Okay.
Nope.
Yeah, I know
The
that they.
oncologist said I had a 13.3 chance of getting breast cancer.
Okay. Wow. I wonder how they figured that out. Like, I want to know where this stuff comes from, man. You know, like where did that number come from? That's interesting. I love
But it was
that.
also like horrifying for her to say that to my
Yeah.
face
Right. It's like
while I have breast cancer.
right. It's like 13 something percent and yet you still got it.
And
It's crazy.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So tell me after you finished your treatment and your lumpectomy, what did they do following that? Were you going to see
Radi-
them? I'm sorry?
radiation.
Okay, so you did radiation. Talk about that a little.
Compared to chemo, radiation for me was a breeze. Um, Even though it was every day, it just, I mean, I physically was in a lot of pain. Like there towards the end, I just sat naked in my house and I would have my arm propped up on the couch because I couldn't touch. I was so burnt, as you know, I couldn't touch skin to skin. So yes, the last like week and then the week or two after radiation ended, it was just a fire burning from inside me that just kept radiating. I just kept burning worse. But I would gladly have taken that over chemo any day. Any day. Like not even, I don't know. It just was such a difference, like versus sitting with needles in you for
Right.
6 hours
Yeah. And I mean, it's
is
so funny because you talk
15
to
minutes.
different people and they have, everybody's
Yes.
experience is different. And like you were talking about getting sick from chemo earlier.
Oh
And
my God.
like I was on like they gave me a regimen of a lot of medication so that I would not get sick. So I never got sick. I never threw up once. I didn't have the nosebleed that you had, not one time. I did have like heartburn.
Yeah.
I was constipated at one point.
Oh my God.
Um
That was the worst.
so yeah, so and I had to do yeah, fun yummy things for that you can read
Mhm.
about in my book if you don't have it. There's plenty of detail in the book about it. But anyway, so yeah, everybody's experience is so different, and then some people think chemo is better than radiation, and some people, it just depends on
Mhm.
what's happening, and I'm sure so many different variables, like if your skin is more maybe sensitive, or just so many different things. But now that you've finished all your treatments, so this all happened back in 2020. So now that
Yeah,
you
to
finished,
2020, it went into 2021.
gotcha, yeah, gotcha. So after all that stuff had completed, chemo, lumpectomy, radiation, how
Mhm.
often did you then start going to see your oncologist? Were you still following up for a certain amount of time?
I'm still doing that. So 3 months, I do blood labs, mammogram, the left breast. Sometimes I still do CT scans and MRIs because I've had a lot of residual health issues from treatment. I had to have back surgery, um, and various, like right now, of course, I'm blanking. I have a lot of like needles put into my hands. I lost the use of my hands for a while.
What were the needles in your hands for?
Think they were steroids.
Huh.
Yeah. Like my fingers quit working, my wrist quit working.
Was it
They had and gloves. They thought it was neuropathy at
right?
first.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. Is that's
Mhm.
very common as neuropathy with cancer treatment, but it didn't sound like that's what it was. Did they figure out what it was?
Inflammation. Like I got
Huh.
really bad inflammation where my wrists and hands quit
Oh
working.
my gosh! And being a teacher,
Like,
girl.
yeah, well, and I wasn't back at work yet.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah.
Like my dad was, my friends were doing gross things for me because I like couldn't
Oh my
physically
gosh, that's
move my
terrible.
hands.
How long?
And my eyesight, I lost like my hearing, my eyesight, um, left as well.
Yeah.
Started to lose fingernails, toenails turned
Right.
black. Like
Oh.
I've lost a tooth now. I mean, yeah, it's
Well,
just
and for those watching that don't know, the chemo kills fast dividing cells, and fast dividing cells are your hair, and in your fingernails, in your digestive system, and your including in your mouth. So that is why the tooth. That's why the fingernails. All the different things, and like I'm like looking at the clock, and I'm like, dang it! All right, so here's the deal, Angela. We
yes.
do our triple negative breast cancer broadcast every March, around March the 3rd. And I would love you to be a part of that broadcast, because I just feel like we have so much more to cover. So you don't have to agree to it right now on camera, but I'll let you know the date, and hit me up after tonight, and let's make sure and get you glued down for that. Cause I would love to have you to be able to tell more of your story, because all the adverse effects you had, people need to hear about that, because it's not talked about very frequently. A lot of times people just think, oh, you lose your hair, you might get sick, and that's it. But you had a lot of different things going on, and I want people to hear your full story. And I can't believe how quickly our time went by, girl. I'm
I
like,
talk
dang
a
it.
lot.
It's okay, man. We're having fun. We're chilling out
I,
together. It's amazing. It's
well,
amazing.
I was gonna say March 1st is my 50th birthday.
Oh, cool.
So I would be honored to talk about this for my birthday.
Oh, that's awesome. We would be honored to have you too. Your story is so compelling and inspiring, and just the positive energy that you're radiating, it just needs to be shared with the world. So be sure, and once we share this out on our YouTube channel, we'll make sure that people are aware of it and can come back and watch the replay, because I want them to hear this part of the story, and then they can catch the other half of the story next March on our triple negative breast cancer broadcast. It would be so awesome.
Okay. Thank
Cool.
you.
You bet, man. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm sorry that we couldn't, I just want to keep going on, but Kenny's over here waiting. He's starting
That's
here in about 5 minutes. So I got to make
well, and
sure
I've
and
got
get
this
him some time.
happening.
There you go. A cameo by the cat. Got to have that.
Yes.
All right, girl. Well, you have a great evening, and thanks again for joining, okay?
I will. Thank you, April. Thank you for
Take care.
everything.
Sure. Take care, girl. Bye.
Bye.